They didn't knock, they didn't ask questions, they didn't check the facts. They assumed I was just another homeowner they could pressure, a name on a list, another target for fines, letters, and warnings. One envelope slid under my door, neat and confident, claiming my construction project violated community standards, the kind of official-sounding language designed to intimidate anyone who didn't know better. I read it slowly, folded the paper, and went right back to work. Nothing was wrong. Every permit, every inspection, every detail had been approved and verified. From the very first moment, their biggest mistake wasn't what they wrote, it was who they sent it to. The emails came next, polite at first, then growing sharper, more insistent. Daily fines were mentioned, deadlines were threatened. They even suggested stop work orders, something they had no legal authority to enforce. They cited bylaws like they were law, throwing around terms they barely understood, speaking with absolute confidence while standing on extremely shaky ground. I didn't react. I documented everything. Calls, letters, emails, every overreach, every false claim. They were so confident in their authority that they didn't realize they were digging themselves deeper. Soon, the pressure escalated beyond private emails. Neighbors were copied on threats. I was labeled non-compliant and uncooperative. Their goal was clear: isolate me, intimidate me, and force me to give in. But intimidation only works when the target doesn't understand the rules. I knew every rule better than they did. Behind the scenes, I rechecked permits, verified inspections, and reviewed my project in meticulous detail. Everything was legal, compliant, and fully documented. I was untouchable by the threats they hurled. Out of curiosity and professional habit, I started looking beyond my property. If they thought they could enforce rules without consequence, I wanted to make sure their own structures and common areas were in order. What I found was shocking. Their clubhouse renovations? Unpermitted. The fencing they proudly installed? Violated setbacks. Drainage systems? Modifications that created real hazards. Fire safety compliance? Lacking in multiple areas. Accessibility? Ignored. These weren't minor mistakes. These were clear violations that could have serious consequences. They assumed no one would notice, but I had noticed. I decided to let the process work quietly. The first official county notice went out, then another. Inspections were scheduled. The board members who had once walked around with smug confidence suddenly began to hesitate. Emails became softer, questioning instead of commanding. Phone calls went unanswered. Meetings were canceled. Contractors were called back in to fix violations they had ignored for years. Lawyers were consulted. They were scrambling, panicked, and exposed. The people who thought they could intimidate me were now trying to cover themselves. Through it all, I never announced my title. I never raised my voice. I didn't need to. The law spoke louder than any threat or fine they could send. Deadlines were enforced. Corrections were required. Procedures were followed with calm precision. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't personal. It was accountability. Every letter, every inspection, every notice had a purpose, and every time they ignored it, their situation worsened. As the weeks went on, the fines against me quietly disappeared. The stop work threats vanished. My project moved forward without interruption, fully legal, fully protected. The HOA's biggest mistake wasn't overreach, it was misjudgment. They confused intimidation with authority, volume with power, and confidence with legality. That miscalculation cost them time, money, and credibility. It didn't end there. I continued to monitor the community. Every modification they made was reviewed, every new project inspected. Their power dissolved slowly, almost imperceptibly, but completely. Neighbors who once feared their board started asking questions, noticing inconsistencies, and realizing that the system they relied on for control was flawed. What they thought was intimidation turned into transparency. Their authority was exposed as fragile, based on assumptions rather than law. The final lesson is simple. Never underestimate the person you're trying to bully. Sometimes the quiet homeowner isn't just compliant, they are the one who enforces the rules, understands the law, and knows exactly where real authority begins and ends. And sometimes they don't just comply, they hold others accountable. By the time the HOA realized who they were dealing with, it was too late. Their misjudgment cost them everything: credibility, control, and ultimately respect. In the end, it wasn't about revenge. It was about proving one fact: rules are meant to be followed, authority is earned, and anyone who assumes power without understanding the law is in for a rude awakening. My project was completed legally, efficiently, and without obstruction, while the HOA learned the hard way that overconfidence, ignorance, and misjudgment can have consequences far greater than they ever imagined. And that's the story of how a simple misjudgment by a homeowners association turned into a complete lesson in accountability, and how knowing the rules, understanding the law, and staying calm can turn the tables on even the most aggressive opponents.